Canada just told the United States to move aside, and the entire Western world heard the message. Tuesday, February 3, 2026. Montreal did not seek approval. It announced ambition. The city many assumed would remain under America's shadow just repositioned itself as the financial command hub for NATO's entire defense architecture. We're talking about the bank that will fund billions of dollars in military projects across 40 nations. And Canada is saying it belongs on its territory. Now, what I'm about to show you upends everything you believed about how Western power truly operates. Because for 70 years, the formula was clear. America hosts the money. America sets the decisions. Everyone else follows. That's how NATO functioned. That's how global defense financing worked. That's how the entire Western alliance organized itself around American financial dominance. Montreal just broke that formula with a single announcement. Here's what unfolded. Stephen P. entered Montreal's international headquarters and delivered a statement that sent shockwaves through every NATO capital. Montreal stands alone in Canada as the city that offers all the necessary conditions to host the Defense Security and Resilience Bank. Not we hope to compete, not we'd be honored to be considered. Montreal said we're the one. And then they reinforced it with something Washington didn't expect. Nearly 70 international organizations already operating in the city. 6 United Nations offices. NATO's Climate Change and Security Center already based there. An aerospace sector capable of building an aircraft from start to finish. Financial infrastructure that matches anything in North America. But here's where it gets complicated. Because Montreal wasn't alone. Toronto entered the contest. Ontario Premier Doug Ford threw full support behind Toronto's bid. Same bank, same race, Canada versus Canada. And then it got worse. Ottawa stepped in. Vancouver submitted its proposal. For major Canadian cities, all telling NATO, pick us, pick Canada. But specifically pick us over the others. From NATO's standpoint, that's ideal. Competition creates stronger offers, tougher infrastructure, more aggressive incentives. But from Washington's view, that's a problem because this rivalry exposes something America preferred to keep quiet. Canada is no longer waiting for American approval on financial strategy. They're not asking whether they can participate in global finance decisions. They're insisting on being where those decisions are made. And they're backing it with infrastructure, expertise, and political resolve no one saw coming. This is the part that kept me awake last night. The federal government in Ottawa didn't choose sides between the cities. Instead, they appointed Isabelle Hudon to represent all Canadian interests in the bidding process. Here's who she is. Former ambassador to France, former president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, current CEO of the Business Development Bank of Canada with $40 billion in assets, and someone who understands exactly how Prime Minister Mark Carney views financial sovereignty, because that's what this is truly about. Mark Carney didn't become Prime Minister to maintain the status quo. He returned to Canadian politics in March 2025 with a vision, a comprehensive restructuring of Canada's role in Western finance, shifting from financial dependence on American institutions to financial partnership with them and where appropriate financial competition. The Defense Security and Resilience Bank bid is the clearest expression of that vision so far. Canada isn't asking NATO to include it in financial decisions. Canada is positioning itself to be where those decisions are made. And what happened next proves this isn't just political theater. Quebec Premier. France LGO endorsed Montreal's bid. Mayor Valérie Plante supported it publicly. Minister Christopher Ski threw Quebec's full backing behind it. Standard political protocol up to that point. But then both candidates for the leadership of Coalition Avenue Quebec, Bernard Dréville and Christine Fichette, immediately supported the bid before their leadership race was even settled. That isn't politics. That's consensus. Quebec's entire political establishment across factional lines, saying this bank matters more than partisan positioning. This is Canada's moment, and they aren't letting internal divisions derail it. Now, here's what no one is discussing. This bank isn't a symbolic NATO office. The Defense Security and Resilience Bank is designed to finance military projects across all member states. This is where billions in defense infrastructure spending will be coordinated. This is where procurement decisions receive funding. When Poland needs radar systems, they come here. When Norway needs Arctic surveillance, they come here. When any of 40 NATO and Indo-Pacific countries need capital for F-35 purchases, cyber defense networks, or dual-use technology, they come to this bank. Whoever hosts this institution doesn't just gain prestige. They gain proximity to every major defense contract discussion in the Western Alliance. They gain financial intelligence from seeing where money moves before it moves. They gain the relationships formed when defense ministers and procurement officials are constantly in their city for meetings. Wall Street grasped this immediately. So did Frankfurt and London, which is why Montreal's aggressive positioning caught everyone off guard. Here's where the story becomes truly interesting. Canada didn't arrive with ambition alone. They arrived with infrastructure no one realized they had built. Montreal's pitch to NATO isn't theoretical. It's operational. The city already hosts nearly 70 international organizations. It already runs 6 United Nations offices. It has already managed NATO's Climate Change and Security Center of Excellence for years. This isn't a city learning how to handle multilateral institutions. This is a city that's been doing it while the world focused on New York and Brussels. And then there's aerospace. Montreal is the only place in North America where an entire aircraft can be built from start to finish in one city. Bombardier is there. CA, the world's largest flight simulator manufacturer, is there. Pratt & Whitney Canada, Rolls-Royce Canada, all operating major facilities in the same metropolitan area. When NATO procurement officials need to evaluate defense aviation projects, they're already familiar with Montreal's capabilities. But that's not the real story. The real story is what this competition reveals about Canada's defense industrial transformation. For decades, Canadian defense companies hit a wall. Banks wouldn't touch them. Too risky. Not our sector. Reputational issues. Defense contractors in Canada were literally being debanked for being in defense. Reports indicate Kevin Reed, president of the Defense Security and Resilience Bank Development Group, told a federal committee exactly this. Companies lost banking relationships simply for working in defense. That created a massive gap. Canadian firms had the technical skill to compete globally, but couldn't access the capital to scale. Now, what I'm about to show you changes the entire picture, because the DSRB isn't just about financing NATO projects. It's about building an entirely new financial ecosystem for defense innovation. And whoever hosts it shapes how that ecosystem evolves. Think about what that means in practice. When procurement officials from Poland, Germany, Norway, and the Baltics are regularly flying to Montreal or Toronto for financing meetings, they aren't just attending board sessions. They're touring facilities. They're meeting Canadian aerospace firms. They're sitting with Canadian defense contractors. They're assessing Canadian technology companies for partnerships. Relationships formed in bank boardrooms create defense contract opportunities. Canada's defense industry has always been capable. It just competed from the edges while American and European giants captured the largest deals. Hosting this bank fundamentally alters the competitive landscape. Montreal's pitch specifically highlights this ecosystem integration. Sources confirm they're not just selling hosting capacity, they're selling expertise. You want defense financing, we offer it. You want aerospace expertise to evaluate proposals, we have it. You want financial modeling that understands military procurement timelines. We've done it for decades. Wall Street offers capital. Montreal offers capital plus strategic defense knowledge. That's a completely different value proposition. And Washington is quietly realizing something uncomfortable. If Canada successfully hosts this bank, the next logical step is expanding Canadian involvement in NATO's other financial infrastructure. The NATO Infrastructure Fund, defense investment pledge mechanisms, collaborative procurement programs. Each represents billions in annual flows. Each creates opportunity for the host nation's financial sector. Each builds relationships that translate into broader economic influence. And each has historically been managed through American or European centers, preserving traditional power hierarchies. Canada hosting the DSRB doesn't just break that pattern. It sets a precedent. If Montreal or Toronto proves capable of managing NATO defense financing, every other alliance financial function becomes open for Canadian bids. But here's the twist no one anticipated. The European Union is watching closely because if Canada positions itself as NATO's financial partner rather than America's financial dependent, it opens space for European capitals to assert their own financial autonomy. Brussels doesn't want everything routed through New York any more than Ottawa does. Someone had to go first to prove alternatives exist. Montreal just volunteered and win or lose. The signal has been sent. Canada is competing for financial infrastructure that shapes Western defense policy. Documents show Prime Minister Carney understands a fundamental truth. Military sovereignty without financial sovereignty is incomplete. You can have elite forces, advanced equipment, strong alliances, but if your defense relies on another country's financial institutions, you're not fully sovereign. This bid is about changing that equation, not just for Canada, but for the alliance. Because once one NATO member hosts critical financial infrastructure, others will follow. Poland may bid to host procurement financing for Eastern Europe. Norway may manage Arctic defense investment. Spain may compete for Mediterranean security funding. Once the monopoly breaks, the first mover shapes how the new system is built. First movers don't just participate, they set the rules. That's what Canada is doing now. That's what the Montreal bid represents. Financial sovereignty as national strategy and the quiet recognition across NATO capitals. The Canadian leadership under Mark Carney isn't waiting for American permission to pursue Canadian interests. Does this change how you view Canada's role in the Western Alliance? Because we're not finished. Now, we need to talk about the man behind this strategy. None of this happens without Mark Carney's return to Canadian politics. March 2025, Carney becomes Prime Minister after winning the Liberal Party leadership with over 85% of the vote. Former Governor of the Bank of Canada, former Governor of the Bank of England, the first non-British citizen to ever hold that role. He didn't return to manage incremental policy tweaks. He returned with a doctrine, a comprehensive plan to restructure Canada's position in the global financial system. And what we're learning is that this vision is specific. Moving Canada from financial client to financial architect, from policy taker to policy maker, from American satellite to independent power center. The DSRB bid is the operational expression of that doctrine. Look at the pattern. When Carney led the Bank of England from 2013 to 2020, London became the Western world's alternative financial center to New York. Not in opposition, but independent, a place where governments and investors could access Western finance without routing everything through Manhattan. That infrastructure was built deliberately. Now Carney is Prime Minister, and suddenly Montreal is bidding to host NATO's defense bank. Toronto is competing for the same prize. Both cities are highlighting capabilities no one doubted, but no one positioned as globally significant until now. That isn't coincidence. That's the Carney Doctrine in action. And then came Davos January 2026, the World Economic Forum. Carney delivered a speech that sent shock waves through the event. Reports show he declared the old international order is over, not declining, not evolving, over. He told middle powers to stop waiting for the rules-based system to protect them and start forming new coalitions based on shared interests. Officials say that speech triggered immediate backlash from Washington. President Trump rescinded an invitation for Carney to sit on a proposed Gaza peace board. Trump later said, "Canada lives because of the United States," and criticized Carney for lacking gratitude. That wasn't diplomatic language. That was a direct challenge to a sitting prime minister. Carney didn't retreat when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent claimed Carney softened his Davos comments in a call with Trump. Carney went on record. "I meant what I said." He added that almost nothing is normal in the United States right now. That's Canada's Prime Minister publicly contradicting the U.S. Treasury Secretary and doubling down. This is where it all connects. The DSRB bid isn't